Hi everyone, my name is Krista Soria and I'm one of the instructors for the 3000 level Leadership Minor courses. Today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about writing your complexity papers. I'm going to be discussing some of the standard research moves that writers make in their papers as they're writing for academia or for publication in academic journals, how to structure your papers, and then finally how to find and integrate some evidence to support some of the claims that you're making in your paper as well. So there's several standard research moves, and researchers, typically rhetoric researchers and linguists sometimes, have analyzed scientific discourse, and that includes within the social sciences as well. They've analyzed this discourse, and they've discovered that there's several moves that authors tend to make in their papers. The first move, and I've always loved this very lovely analogy, is that of joining an academic conversation. In this move, writers will typically discuss what's been written on the topic, why the issue matters. They will summarize and analyze prior work that's been published, and then also identify some gaps and limitations in that prior work as well. So after that conversation has been written in the paper, authors then often move into the next move, which is stating the value of the current paper, the current research, and announcing the plan. So it's addressing questions like, what are some new contributions that your paper adds to the aforementioned conversation? So that's the conversation that sort of happens more in the introduction of the paper. So what are the new contributions to this work? It's very rare that you would find research that's been replicated. And the purpose of it would be to, I'm going to see if the thing that happens over here also happens again over here, and they would sort of announce it as replication work, right? And that replication work might be for the purpose of, say, we did a research experiment in which we gave a randomly sampled group of people an aspirin for their headache, and the other half received, no pills, and we wanted to see who had a reduced headache as a result, right? Well, researchers might replicate that exact same study over and over again. And in that case, it's not necessarily maybe a brand new contribution, but the contribution is, we're looking to see if this happens again and again and again to see if there's some value. But your paper, for the purpose of the Complexity Project, is really to think about some new contributions, right? So what are you learning that's new as related to your project? It's important in this case to avoid anthropomorphizing your paper. This idea of anthropomorphosis is when we attribute human characteristics to non-human things. So a very easy example is I like to think, oh, my dog looks happy, right, because he's smiling. Or my dog feels sad because I'm not there. My dog is lonely. That's all anthropomorphication at work. People tend to do this with their papers as well. So they'll say, this paper describes, or this report discusses, and papers can't describe because they are papers and they are not humans. Reports can't discuss because they are papers and reports and not humans. And so avoid anthropomorphizing your work. And so in this instance, it would be appropriate to write something like, the purpose of this paper is to do X, Y, and Z, or we plan to do X, Y, and Z, so as to avoid language that includes things like this paper will address, this paper will do these things. Papers can't do things because they're dead, right? They're not alive. They can't really act like humans. So, the purpose of this paper is a good way to write it, or we plan to fill this gap in the literature by analyzing the use of aspirin in a new randomly controlled condition. I don't know, something like that. The next big move is to follow the plan of attack, right? You told us earlier what you're going to do, so then follow the plan, right? And for most sections of, at least within social science or natural science, the next section is usually a methodology. So follow that plan, follow those steps, and then introduce us to the new evidence or the results that you've found. After you've discussed your evidence and results, you're going to provide a discussion and recommendations with a connection to additional literature or some of the aforementioned literature. So the stuff that you found, does it relate to other research? And then what do you make of these findings? Finally, the last move is typically to write a type of conclusion. This is not exactly the format of your complexity project paper, but there are some moves that have a lot of similarity, and I'm just sort of introducing this to you as a framework to think about as you're writing your paper, although it's not exactly the framework that you will follow. The overall structure of most academic papers is that they move from the large sort of global view down to the specific view, right? So a statement might be written up here like, college students' leadership development is important to all colleges and universities, right? It's really large. And then we move to the specific, right? We narrow our focus. So yeah, big picture, every college and university president will probably care about college students' leadership development, right? That's the big picture thing. Specifically, though, the intention of this paper is to focus on the community development or the leadership experiences of first-generation college students, right? So you start really big and then you narrow your focus. That tends to be an overarching structure or framework for most papers, right? So you move from the global down to the specific. We're going to investigate how these moves look in a real paper. So this is a paper that I've published. If you want to take a moment to pause the video and go and get it from the library, go right ahead. It's Undergraduate Students' Strengths Awareness and Leadership Development, and it's a study that I did here at the University of Minnesota, where we've done strengths for a really long time, as you might know, and we also asked students to analyze their leadership development, and so we got this published in this journal. So if you want to take a minute to go and find it, you can follow along. What you'll also see, though, is I've taken sections of the paper and I've used them here as an example. So move number one, which is joining an academic conversation, right? These are literally paragraphs like 1 and 2 of my paper. And I know I'm joining an academic conversation because I'm citing other work, I'm citing other research, right? Anytime, and you can see if you look throughout, nearly every sentence has a citation in it, and that's very characteristic of academic work. So I start big and broad. Higher education administrators, faculty, and student affairs professionals are charged with the important task of developing capable, efficacious leaders prepared to respond to society's greatest challenges. Super big and super broad, right? By the time we get down here, we're focusing a little bit, right? My next statement is, leadership opportunities have become really important at many colleges. Every college has expressed a commitment to leadership development. And indeed, researchers have found some evidence for the effectiveness of some institutional practices to promote students' leadership development. So getting really narrow. So for example, Thompson discovered that undergraduates who interacted with peers and faculty had higher leadership beliefs. Several scholars have also identified things like community service, campus leadership experiences, and other things as important in students' leadership development too, right? So it got really big. And I was like, this is important, leadership is important. In fact, there are some institutional practices that we already know are really important in helping students to develop leadership, right? So this is an example of moving from global down to specific, and it's an example of sort of me as a writer joining conversations that have already existed, right? The next move is then stating the value of your work as unique and announcing the plan. So the value of the work here is I identified a gap. So amid all the stuff that we know about college students' leadership development, scholars have called for continued research to examine ways in which higher education professionals can positively enhance college students' leadership development. So what I'm saying is, other people are also saying this stuff is important and we need more research on it, right? So I'm responding to that. In between, we wrote a little bit here and there about strengths, right, on campus, and strengths can lead to self-awareness and can lead to leadership, so that stuff's missing. But then I announced the plan, right? So given this critical need for leaders who can tackle persistent social challenges, examining the potential connections between strengths awareness and leadership development is increasingly imperative. And then here, I'd like to point out something really specifically, the next sentence, right? But again, the value of my work. Why are we doing this, right? What's important about this? I'm making a case that this is important work. this was the journal's style. They next wrote, and I wrote initially, we designed this study, but then they replaced it with the authors. What I encourage you to do, what you should do, what you must do is to always write in first person in your academic work. Use an active voice, right? So this is a style that this particular journal has developed for all of their publications. So they changed all the stuff that was like personal, right? Active voice, in person, first person stuff, they changed it. You need to write, we designed this study to examine whether, right, or the purpose of the study is to examine something, we plan to do these things, right? Use first person, use active voice whenever you can. That's the correct thing to do. So the next move then is follow your plan. I'm not going to go into details, but the next section of our paper is quite literally our methodology. So that's like, what did you do to follow your plan, right? Our plan was to investigate the relationships between college students' strengths awareness and their leadership development, right? So how did we do that? What did we do? The next move is to introduce new evidence and state your results. Here's all of our results, right? Big picture stuff. Students' strengths awareness was significantly associated with their leadership development. Specifically, it was significantly and positively associated with their perceived leadership development above and beyond all of the other variables that we had entered into the model, right? So there's our evidence. We provided a little bit of a discussion with some recommendations and a connection back to other literature. So we've got, and I'll show you just really briefly, again, if you wanted to follow along, right? Here's the paper, and we've got our discussion, starts really kind of up there. We've got our table of results, and we're starting down here. This is our discussion. You can see it's lengthy, right? Quite a bit of discussion given what we had found. But we provide our discussion, we connect it to other research, and then we provide some recommendations, right? So given these associations, we recommend that student affairs practitioners include strengths-related approaches in their daily work. And we go on to talk about those approaches and what else we would recommend connected to other literature, right? So we're tying it back to all sorts of other folks who've already written about this work too. And then a conclusion. So here's the conclusion of our paper. So those are the standard moves, and I've given you a real-world example of what those look like. Let's make some connections to the complexity paper. So the introduction of your paper, you're going to be answering the question, who are these students that you're choosing to focus on, right? So tell us more about first-generation college students, right? Your next section is to really think about 3 to 5 complexities of developing a community for that identity group. So I would talk about 3 to 5 challenges for developing a community for first-generation students. And that might include thinking about barriers to students' engagement, to their development in particular areas, to their success in higher education. And these should all have a really good, strong connection to Peter Block's iPod-CG. So we should be talking about challenges, the possibilities of ownership, of dissent, of commitment, of gifts. We should be integrating these throughout the conversation. We should also talk about some retributive or potentially restorative approaches that are being used. So as an example of something that's more like retributive versus restorative for first-generation students, a lot of practitioners in higher education will try to fix those students and try to make them like more proper or more middle class by requiring them to take classes like etiquette classes, for example. The belief is like, oh, you're deficient, right? There's something wrong with you. You don't have these things because your parents didn't go to college and they didn't teach you these things. So the idea is we're going to fix you and we're going to make you more like us, right? It's very retributive. A restorative approach might be instead to sort of meet students where they're at, to ask them what experiences they want to have in college, right? Because not all first-generation students might not know how to use, dinnerware appropriately or whatever, right? I mean, it's absurd to think that that's even a thing, but that's really a thing. So restorative approaches might work with first-generation students and their parents as they integrate into higher education. might involve parents in these conversations as much as possible, right? That's more of a restorative approach as opposed to retributive, which is like, you're broken, we need to fix you so you can be like us. Restorative is like, we want to get to know you and what you bring to the table, and without trying to fix students. We're also asking you to answer like the benefits of developing healthy and productive communities for the students. So, what are the potential outcomes related to first generation students if they're able to join communities and have communities of belonging on campus? Like, what's at stake, right? What kind of benefits could we see? And then finally, some recommendations for practice, right? So some of these are very much in line with the moves of standard research papers. Some of these are a little different, but really research should be integrated throughout all of this good stuff, right? Even down to the recommendations. So here's a very explicit example of how I might write this paper, and not the whole paper, mind you, but these are the types of things that I might think about writing if I were to write, for example, an introduction. So that basic question is, who are these students, right? So I'm writing about first generation students, and just a note, I made up every one of these citations, but I just did them to show you what that would look like, right? So first generation students continue to enroll on college campuses in increasing numbers. In fact, 25% of all new college students are the first in their families to attend college. Compared to their peers, first generation students are more likely to be older, have dependents, belong to an underrepresented racial and ethnic group, and come from lower income backgrounds. Experts suggest that these students experience significant challenges in higher education, including a lower sense of belonging, early withdrawal before degree completion, and fewer opportunities to become involved on college campuses. These factors can compromise first-generation students' ability to feel like they're a part of a community in higher education, right? Nice and succinct. I'm telling you who these students are. I'm telling you some of these challenges, right? I'm labeling what might be some aspects of their identities that might be complex, right? That might contribute to complexities. So these are the types of moves that I'm making in my introduction. And with all these citations and integrating all these resources, I'm definitely entering into an academic conversation, right? I'm citing my sources throughout. And it's believable because I'm citing sources. So you're next moving into like what's missing, right? That's kind of the next part of that piece so that we get to see the value of your paper. So while much is known about the greater challenges facing first-generation college students in higher education, little is known about the complexities facing these students with regards to their community involvement. Even though experts have found strong evidence to support the importance of a sense of belonging in college student success, first-generation students are significantly less likely to feel like they belong in higher education, right? So again, I'm identifying this gap. What's missing? So we know community is important, but students are less likely to feel like they belong. So that's the problem. That's what's missing, right? State your plan is the next piece of that. So the purpose of this paper is to investigate the complexities surrounding first-generation students' community integration in higher education. First, we will describe the barriers or challenges, right, to iPods-AG. Next, we will describe restorative and retributive approaches. We will offer evidence for the importance of developing communities for first-gen students, followed by recommendations to come and write and implement iPods-AG for these students. So this type of paragraph here really frames the paper. And if you take a good look at it, you'll see that it follows pretty closely the structure of the paper. We're going to describe those barriers and challenges. We're going to talk about blocks to iPods-AG. We're going to talk about retributive and restorative approaches. We're also going to talk about why this matters, so why it's important to develop communities for first-gen students, and then recommendations to come and write and to implement iPods-AG. And that follows very closely the structure of the paper, and that's the plan, right? This is all very important in the introduction of your paper. We call this very often an advance organizer, especially this part here where you tell us what's going to come next, right? You're organizing this information for your reader so that your reader knows what they're about to read and can better understand kind of your structure. If you look at such a sentence or such a paragraph too, this also tells you the work that you need to do, right? So you need to describe the barriers or challenges. That's research that you need to conduct, right? You need to connect that research to blocks, iPod, CG. Step number 2. Number 3, what are the restorative and nutritive approaches? And you need to, again, bring in research, right? But you've got these different sections and it kind of helps you, it's like a roadmap, and you'll sort of see where you need to go and what you need to do in terms of research. So for your complexity paper, it's important to frame it sort of from a really big picture. Like, what is known? What do we know about these students? And why should we care, right? If you talk about the complexities of developing communities among groups of students who don't have a problem being integrated into communities, I mean, you don't really have a good paper because, like, who cares, right? What are the complexities of like the most popular people entering into communities? I don't know. Popular people always seem to do pretty fine, you know. Now you could probably find something about anxieties popular people feel. I don't know, but I'm sort of just framing this as like, this is why we're looking at these unique populations. These are populations who tend to struggle with, joining communities, feeling integrated and feeling like they belong. And research supports all this good stuff, right? And so what are these complexities? If you were looking at, I want to share too that the outcomes of this paper don't always have to mean or be associated with students' retention and graduation, right, or overall success in higher education. You can think about students' development of outcomes as also very important. So I'm getting just a tad bit off track, but one thing that I want to share, I have a good pal. Her name is Georgiana Martin. And she's written a lot about fraternities and sororities and socially responsible leadership. And hopefully that pops up right away. Yep. And so she has written a lot about this type of work and, really good stuff about encouraging students who participate in fraternities and sororities to develop these socially responsible leadership skills. And as we know from media, right, with some stuff that happened with fraternities last year, not in Minnesota necessarily, but elsewhere, right, this is a hot topic. I mean, this is something that we need to be concerned about, right, is students in fraternities and sororities leaving with a sense of doing good in the world, right? Not discriminating against people. And so that's a hot topic. And so that could be an outcome that you could care about, and students in fraternities and sororities tend to graduate on time. They do very well. They're very successful in terms of their graduation. But do they always leave their campuses, having diverse experiences? Those are good questions, right? So think about outcomes in multiple ways. But that gets us to like, why do we care, right? What's missing in the research is important for you to consider what's unknown, right? Because the goal of this paper is to fill that gap. What's the purpose of this paper? Thinking about some of these big questions is going to be really helpful for you as you are framing your work. So the purpose of your paper is to investigate the complexities of leadership and community development for a particular subgroup, right? That's your purpose. And then develop a plan and then follow through on that purpose. Finally, big picture, be sure to integrate research throughout and then respond to all of the prompts as well. So integrate research as much as possible. And I'll say too that some of this stuff is you're going to be making new connections, and that's the missing piece. Nobody has ever written or published anything about ownership and commitment as Peter Block defines them, for first-generation students. That this hasn't happened, right? You're making these connections. You're sort of taking what Peter Block has written with that iPod CG framework, and you're extrapolating it to the other experiences that are known about these groups of students. So nobody's ever done this explicit work for you, right? Your task is to do this work for the first time. And that's the beauty of this research too, is you are making these wonderful connections, and that's the beauty of complexity, right? As we initiate any research study, there's some stuff that we know and there's a lot of stuff that we don't know, and the purpose of the research is to fill in those gaps. So if you have any questions, please talk to your instructors about research. You're also welcome to email me at any time. It's ksoria@umn.edu. I'll go ahead and just type it on here as well. And I wish you the best of luck with your research for your complexity project. I hope you have some good fun. Thanks a lot.